Hello, and thank you so much for inviting us to take part in your DQ Awareness Week. I'm Matt Flenley. I look after marketing at Datactics, and I'm joined by my colleague Fiona Browne, who heads up AI. So Fiona looks like this, I look like this. We're going to talk about the art of the possible when it comes to data and data management. And so I'd like to thank Leslie and all of the financial ombudsmen for inviting us along to do this today. We picked a few questions that are close to our hearts just to kind of chat about, because I'm conscious that this is a topic that we talk about all the time internally at a firm like Datactics, but maybe doesn't make it outside our walls. So if that's okay with you, Fiona, we'll just get cracking. So tell me a bit about what you're working on right now in the AI team. What's the most interesting thing you're working on that's maybe pushing the boundaries from a data point of view?
Yeah, so thanks, Matt. So there's a number of areas that we're working on in the machine learning team across the data quality lifecycle. So a project which we have finished has been matching, and most of the solutions that we have is to address what are the real manual time-consuming tasks involved in data quality type projects. So in matching, we looked at an area where you had SMEs going in and manually looking at data and say, yeah, this is a match, or no, this isn't a match. And we're able to deploy ML in there to capture what the SMEs are doing, to learn from what they're doing and to make recommendations on that. So that's what we have finished off. And what that's taught us is the importance of transparency and explainability in the process as well. So that's what we're then building into our current projects and future projects. So again, on that area of manual tasks, things like you've got a data set. What's in here? What data quality rules could I run on here? It's taken the same idea of embedding SMEs' expertise, mapping what they have done in the past to similar type of data, or maybe recommending them rules that they haven't thought of themselves, and then feeding that back into the machine again. And another area that we look at is at the end of the data quality process. So you've run your projects, and here are all the quality breaks. So looking at things from a time series point of view, do you see the same pattern of breaks coming up time and time again? You've got lots of breaks. Where do you start? Using ML to help with the optimal remediation path. So lots of interesting areas that we're covering within the group at the moment.
Very good, very good. I think that feeds in quite nicely to something I'm quite interested in quite naturally, which is sort of what people think is a futuristic data thing that actually we take for granted nowadays. And I think from my point of view, that's very much in the space of data being made available to people like me. So I'm non-technical, but I used to work with a lot of data when I worked in a bank, and I think that's something that is vitally important, and people maybe overlook. Because historically, and certainly currently in a lot of firms, the way that you actually manipulate and work with data is typically somebody who's got programming expertise does that for you. You send them a ticket request, and then it comes back to you in however that's been interpreted. Yeah. And one of the problems with that is it's a really long time frame of prone to lots of misinterpretation along the way. But something that we're seeing right now is with lots of our clients is the fact that they should be able to self-serve for data as they would do for analytics or decisioning systems or any other part of their day-to-day business as usual operation. And certainly if I look back at the time when I worked in banking, if instead of my asking somebody else to provide me with a data set, which was normally, maybe once every 3 months, it was fixed, it might be in a TXT file, and I would then have to go and manipulate that in everyone's favorite off-the-shelf Excel tool. The fact that I can then get access to live data in a secure way that's not going to disturb the underlying data and its protection and policy, etc., but I can actually use that for my purposes to be able to understand where my duplication lies in my product line, or how my customer experience scores are working, how I can plug that into things that do semantic analysis to understand really it's not just what someone's expressed as a score, but actually the sentiment of their answer. This was like my daily grind trying to get hold of this kind of data. So for me, the fact that is right now, the fact that that is happening right now is probably the most interesting. Have you a similar sort of experience of something that's futuristic, or did I throw that one at you unexpectedly?
Well, I think maybe taken from what you said,
Yeah.
Matt, you know, you're the expert in that data, and what the now is overcoming is that disconnect between, you know, the technical side, which you know, is involved in extraction, manipulation, and so on, and embedding then that expertise with it. So that's where I think the future now is, is bringing those two together. So it's really important to bring that subject matter expertise into the process.
Very good. No, I totally agree. I think it's a topic that's really close to my heart. Not just because I'm in marketing and I'm always talking about this and how this is working for our clients in particular, but truly because I believe it is the way forward. It comes with risks though, and I think the application of this in the area of things like AI ethics, I think is something that we really should talk about. You know, we're talking about the art of the possible, but we're sort of saying, okay, well, that comes with its own risks.
Yeah. So actually, this is what I really wanted to ask you, Matt, is about the topic of AI and ethics. And I know you've recently talked about this. It's a real passion piece for you. So to maybe tease out where you think that area currently is and where it needs to go to.
Yeah, it's as you say, it's something I'm passionate about. I did a talk with the Open University recently on a combination of business ethics and data ethics. The reason why I think it's so important is because so many of these things that happen without us being seen, which is the expectation we'll have into the future as more and more of this will occur. We have to be able to explain why decisions were made, to be able to understand that they were free from bias, that no unintentional bias occurred, or indeed intentional bias. And in my research for the Open University's talk, I discovered that very often the biggest problem is the people that sit before it even gets anywhere near the computer, before it even gets anywhere near an algorithm. There was a study that was done into how US school counselors would put forward various students for advanced learning based on resumes, based on descriptions of those students. And they wanted to test to understand, was that process free from bias? And they took all of the names off the reports, and they then substituted those names for ones which indicated either a certain gender or a certain racial background. Just randomly applied that to the data set. And what you then had is you had a set of scores of how well people were performing, and then you had a set of names and a set of genders. And what happened was, completely outside of any automated decisioning, you had a bias that typically put white males into advanced learning subjects. That itself is fraught with so much risk. And before you even get to a point where we are even now in terms of the application of AI decisioning that's used on the back of flawed human decisioning, you end up with really unexplainable behavior, like multiplied multiple times, and people end up in a situation where they're excluded or they miss out and they're prejudiced against by both humans and the system, which definitely sounds like a kind of a fight the power kind of thing. But we have the opportunity, I think we have the opportunity to get this right.
And that's right. And that's where the AI augmented data quality fits within this as well. So we've got the tools to create these data sets. And we've also got the capabilities to analyze these data sets. So we know biases are inherent. We know unfairness happens, and we can actually use these tools to measure for this. So you could have metrics linked to bias, you could have metrics linked to fairness, and you can perform your analysis on your data sets before it's even fed into a model.
Mm-hmm.
So simple things like, you know, segmentation of your data. Is it correctly segmented? Do you have the proper groups firstly included in there, represented in there, and at equal values? And you can do a real deep dive into the features of your data set. So you had highlighted there, Matt, that having, you know, gender and maybe even where you live would dictate, you know, what outcome you would have. So again, you can do testing to see, do these features have an impact on the outcome, and if so, take them out, you know. And again, that was very similar to the recent GCSE and A-level predictions as well. So depending on where you lived really was a driver on the mark that you were predicted.
Mm-hmm.
And then that builds in again, where was the transparency in that process? Can you explain what the main features and so on? So there's been a lot of work and discussion around this in terms of being able to explain, describe your data before it even goes into a model, its provenance, its lineage, how it's all divided up and so on. So yeah, this is where data quality and our worlds collide on this side as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really exciting space for us to be working in, right at the centre of those two, that sort of overlapping Venn. I like to express things in Venn diagrams if I can, even if they're only theoretical. So that's all very now. What's next for you, either through what you're working on or sessions that you're panelist on? What's on the agenda for you next?
Yeah. So again, it's augmenting at the moment, augmenting current processes, which are probably very good, with machine learning to improve speeds and efficiencies and embedding learning and so on. So that's the now. Going forward into the future, so we see how machine learning is going to be applied to, you know, all aspects of our life. So for example, do I get a loan or not? What type of medical treatment is most suitable to me, and so on. So it's going to become ubiquitous in our day-to-day life. And maybe one thing to highlight is that it's not just ubiquitous to the people using ML to make predictions on you. It's going to be useful for you as well. So an example is, say for example, you're applying for a credit card or a mortgage for a house, and you're going through the process. At the moment, you need to go through the full process to be told, no, you haven't got this. And then that's then recorded on your credit score, which can have an impact and decrease your credit score. But where we could see machine learning applied is that as you go through the process, it will flag up, actually, I don't think you're going to get, you know, this credit card, and the reason is X, Y, and Z. So it's picked up that you've missed 5 previous payments. So you can go back and rectify that. So it's nearly as an aid for you, and you don't even realise that it's happening. So I think it's going to be further imbued into our daily lives.
And presumably then the outputs from that process that explain who missed out and why, that you can also use alternative data on, you know, where you've lived, your student background, or all the rest of it, to again understand what you could change, what you could do differently, and then how that model could be used to predict future acceptance rates, etc., which will be useful for both the consumer being able to understand at a personal level what they'll get, but also for financial institutions to be able to understand what their risk profile is and their likely return for a product that has certain risk parameters set. It definitely feels as though that can give some outputs then to regulatory authorities on who is being included or excluded and why. I guess with AI, the big question is always why.
That's it, and it's so important as well. And having you know, this transparency and explainability baked into that, you know, you'll be able to find out why you were rejected. And as a consumer, you should be able to go back and say, what data set was this model trained on? You know, can you give an overview of it? Was it representative, and so on, and to be able to challenge that as well.
Absolutely, because the risk really is, you know, that a lot of this stuff just happens, and people don't have the opportunity to intervene with the process, and then they feel either permanently or are permanently excluded from it. And I think probably for me that's okay. It's a nice intersection of something I'm passionate about from a cultural point of view and an AI ethics point of view, but it feeds in quite nicely in terms of you know, what's coming up for me in terms of communicating that. Connecting end users to the data that they rely on for every day-to-day purpose, and then also down to the downstream decisions that are made on that data.
And these conversations are happening now. So people are talking about ML. They're talking about decisions being made. They're talking about unfairness and bias and so on. And this is great to be talking about. And there'll be more doing as we go forward.
Fab. I think that probably wraps us up. Thank you again, Leslie. Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for this opportunity to pitch some of what we are passionate and what we care about to all of you. And I hope the week goes extremely well. So cheerio from both of us.
Bye.
Bye.